Good. So we're here talking with Dr. Rob Bell. Rob, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So before we start, just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about those wonderful books that you have there.
Yeah, so I'm a sports psychology coach, and so I work with athletes and coaches and teams and executives on mental toughness, which is how do we perform our best when it matters the most? And then the other part is how do we deal and handle and cope with the adversity and struggle and the setbacks in life? And I always say, look, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when we're gonna face that. So pretty blessed to work with so many different types of athletes and got a great office, man. So excited to talk today.
That's fantastic. So where are you located?
I live in Indianapolis.
Okay. And so how does it work? Like, let's say I need help. So what's the process?
Yeah. Well, it's a good one, man. I mean, and I think that's it because I think, when it comes to coaching, it's more art than it is science.
Mhm.
I think the relationship that you build with somebody is more important than the advice that you give. So I think that the way that somebody lives their life trumps the instructions that they give. How it works, I mean, and that's what's difficult. It's difficult to give turn by turn directions because we got to know, number one, what's the destination? So where are we going?
Mhm.
How are we going to know when we reach it? So, you have the goal, then you have that process, which is important. And how are we going to know success? How are we going to celebrate success along the way? And then from that, then I think, we're always starting with the end in mind, then it's starting back way even before the beginning. So if you kind of think of like the Star Wars trilogy, it kind of jumps all over the place. I think that's the way probably mental coaching works the same way. And then when we start at the very beginning, it's starting back to why you do what you do. What, especially when you get to somebody's why, it's going to probably about 3, 4 levels deep about why you do what you do. And then from that, then I can think we can expose them. Well, what's the motivating factors behind what we do? And then from that, man, then it's just it's coming up with the absolute correct game plan, and then communicating that game plan, and then working that plan. That's all it is when it comes to mental coaching, man. I'm a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy, cash and carry, straightforward. So I think the job of a coach, very, very important, is to be able to point out the blind spots in people's life, and I think everybody needs a coach. I need a coach. It's really difficult to coach ourselves. That's the part that I think is most difficult. And I don't think we were meant to put on this earth to coach ourselves. I think we're allowed, to coach others and allow others to coach us.
So, and you have coached or are currently coaching all ages, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. From professional and collegiate to elite, and then again, I mean, with my executives that I coach as well. I mean, those are athletes. I just call them corporate athletes. They're everyone's an athlete. Our office is just different. I mean, so these are grown up individuals with families and different types of pressures, different types of expectations, and a lot of times they're focused on the significance rather than just the success piece in their life.
That sounds amazing. So, when you have when you coach younger kids,
Yep.
say high school and below, um, obviously you need depending how young you are going to need a parent to be present. I mean, to bring the child to
Yeah.
you. How do you work with that relationship? Because obviously you are coaching the young athlete, you're not coaching the parents. But then, in a sense, I'm assuming you kind of are coaching the parent too.
Yeah, I think that's where it's definitely a dance when it comes to that because the first question we always ask is, did your kid want this? Is this something your kid wants? We'll get calls all the time. Well, no, I didn't really talk to them, but I just think it'd be a good idea. Well, why don't you go talk to your son or daughter about it and see if this is something that they want? Because unless they are 100% absolutely this is what I want, it's just not going to work. It's not going to be effective because we're trying to force something on them. And then from that, I mean, it's like I said at the very beginning, it's like a relationship that we build. So we're always taking that initial session and being able to come up with a game plan.
Mhm.
There are a lot of people that, I thought at first when I really got in this field that, man, I can help everybody. And that's not true. I mean, there's probably half I can help. And the reason why is because, once we get out of that pain, we stop doing the things that we have to do. And the coaching piece is very, very difficult. So then when it comes to the parents, obviously, I'm trying to give them a copy of my book, don't shoot on your kids, and just kind of have them read it. Then it becomes the dynamics of, if I'm working with an athlete, it has to be between us and then letting the parents know. So I try to let the parents know. We try to have those conversations before.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing we can't do is then like, well, what'd y'all talk about? So part of what we do too is that actual art of, man, I'm encouraging all my athletes to make sure you share this stuff with your parents. It's just going to kind of bridge that gap of, well, what is it that you're doing? And how do we get better on those sort of things? The trust and communication piece is huge. It's really huge.
For sure. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Oh, sorry. Do you work usually in an office or do you work on the field too?
Well, I'll do both. Depends on if I'm working with the team, depends on the relationship with the athlete and where we're at. If my office changes, so it could be the golf course, could be the swimming pool, could be a basketball court. And a lot of those conversations, a lot of shoulder to shoulder, we're kind of processing the information together. And there's performance related to it. So if there's performance related to it, it's kind of a stressful environment.
Mm-hmm.
It might be low stress, but there's still kind of stress. When we can still get the face to face and they don't have the ball in front of their hands or they're not kind of like, hey, watch me,
mm-hmm.
Then we can still get real. So I think both those have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because then even a lot of times if we're having face to face, then we kind of see then what happens actually out there on the court or out there on the pitch, then you can be able to point out and notice some things. Best part about coaching is the art of noticing. Well, unless you're able to watch it, you miss some things. You're just getting their perception of things.
Yes, that is so true. So I'm because I know you a little bit, I know that you words are very important to you and how we speak. It's not just what we say, but it's also how we say it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So because I know a lot of coaches, they always do the don't do blah, 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 or you can do blah, blah, blah. How do we educate coaches in general in understanding that what we say matters?
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a lot better coaches than I am. So, I think when you interview some really good ones, they're probably going to come up with some better nuggets. The only thing I can really offer is just treat every athlete as if their biggest issue is a lack of confidence. How would that change then our communication with them? See, a lot of times we think it's the lack of motivation or trying, and that's not really at all. So if you treat every athlete as what they really struggle with is a lack of confidence, kind of changes how we're going to be able to approach that. I've got an extreme amount of respect for coaches because what they do is really, really tough. I think on those very, very difficult conversations. So that's it. If we can talk like every athlete is what they really struggle with is lack of confidence. The other piece is we got to talk about all stressful situations and non-stressful environments. I think when those really difficult conversations have to happen, they cannot happen in a highly stressful environments. They're just not going to be effective. It's not going to work. And it's not a one-time thing. These are conversations that have to happen on a continuous basis, there are no bad athletes. There's just bad leadership. I believe in that. I believe that, we haven't communicated our point well enough. We haven't received the feedback from them that our point is clear. So communication is getting back to that, man. That's what's so important. So those are the two things. If we treat every athlete, every conversation like it's a lack of confidence, and then talk about all stressful situations and non-stressful environments, I think that's how we kind of improve our coaching.
I like that a lot, actually. Before I get back to this, because I want to expand on it, I wanted to ask, because you have both athletes who are either golfer or tennis players, individual sports, so to speak, but you also have work with basketball players or soccer players, so what's the difference for you when you coach someone individually that is doing an individual sport versus a team.
Yeah. So if you talk to any tennis coach, they're going to ask, like, well, what's more difficult, an individual sport or a team sport? All individual sport coaches are going to say it's an individual sport because it's just you.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that point, up to a point, because I think it's a yes and instead of an either or.
Yeah.
Because even though it is just you, it's just you. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you're in a team sport environment, there's a lot of expectations, a lot of communication, a lot of drama that happens, a lot of setbacks, and everyone processes it differently. And so if you deal with a team of, 11 people, the number of relationships aren't 11 number of relationships. I mean, they get multiplied several times. So if there's even 3 people in a discussion, if you think about the number of relationships just in that, you've got a one-on-one with 2 people, so there's 2 different relationships. Mm-hmm. But then you have a one-on-2,
mm-hmm.
and so there's 3 different relationships that are happening. Well, then you have to multiply it a couple different times, because then it's 2 people against 1 or 2 people versus 1 in a conversation. Think about 11, so many different personalities, so many ways people are going to handle adversity. And so a lot of regards, those are more difficult situations to handle with the team. And so when it comes to that, I think working with an athlete, a lot of times I'm just not so much concerned about like who's the best on the team, more focused on who's the best for the team and how are they, how are they helping others reach their goal? Because I think that's what becomes very, very important, especially then in life. If we can help enough people get to where they want to go, we're going to get to where we want to go.
I like that you said who is the best for the team. I really like that, because that is so true with teams.
Yeah, and we got a lot of them.
I know, but I've had teams where one of our better players left, and I was so happy.
Right.
Yep. Because he was such a cancer for the team. The family was a cancer to the team. And it was just like, no, this is not working. And when they left, I was like, oh, thank God you saved me the trouble of kicking you out.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was just like, oh, finally. And immediately, as soon as he left, the whole team gelled. Because he was always trying to weasel and create dramas and doubts and, no, don't listen to coach, or don't do that, or whatever it is. Too many people are focusing on the best player and not on what's best for the team.
Right. Yep.
I guess it's the whole thing about you have to win. So instead of actually building kids up, we have to win.
Yeah, I mean, if that starts at a younger age, the development doesn't take place, and then we're just propping up the best players, and we do whatever we can to win now instead of working on an actual plan of development. So when win trumps it, it's sexy, it's exciting, it's what people want. Well, when they leave that team, they go on the next team, and it's the same exact thing. So we just applaud the talent piece instead of working on the really tough skills, which is the leadership, communication, how do we handle adversity, and how do we gel together as a team, and the cohesion and the culture. Like, that stuff really doesn't take place a lot. When it does, now you got championship teams when it matters the most.
So how do you, because obviously there is a piece, and you talk about this a lot, and you even have a book, the one behind you, for example, that you cannot do this alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. So how do we bring more coaches into what you do and make them understand, look, there's no one piece that can be by itself. How do we educate people of how important this is?
Yeah, I think that's the piece, right? It always comes back to when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. No matter what, always does. If a coach doesn't want the information, it doesn't really matter. How do you try and change somebody's mind?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really tough to do. It's only when they want the information, then you can be brutally honest with them. It's the only time that I see change happens, when the pain is greater than the benefits that we're getting. It's the only time it happens at any kind of level.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's pro, high school, doesn't matter. So if we still get some of the success and we're okay with the mediocrity, then change isn't going to happen, man. We'll cheer for 5th place like it's the best ever, and that's okay. And if that's what the goals are, and that's fine. And I'm not saying it's getting back to winning at all costs. What I'm saying is depending on what our goals are as a team and how we want to develop individuals. That said, I mean, we have to know what the ultimate goal is. And the ultimate goal of sports, especially youth sports, is being able to help individuals with the skills that are going to last way beyond when the sport is over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part where I love, really good athletes, but when they're great people. And you've heard this one before, and, better athletes don't make better people. Better people make better athletes. So how are we actively then working on those skills of communication, of empathy, of being able to communicate? A lot of times, and I see it, I mean, just people don't, even young kids, like they just don't want to be told what to do. And at some point, like you're going to have a boss, like they are going to tell you what to do. Well, if we can't develop that now when you're 13 or 14, when are they going to learn it? When are they going to learn it? And that's the part where I just see that's the real beauty about what sport can provide. And that's why I'm such an advocate of youth sport in general, man. It's because I don't know any other way, any other opportunity where striking out the bases loaded, it just becomes the best learning experience that they can have.
If only parents would believe that too, all right?
Again, I don't want my kids striking out the bases loaded,
Nobody does.
But it's going to happen. And then it becomes, how can we implement only then, when the adversity hits, only then are we really building then the mental toughness, that grit, that resiliency. Doesn't happen without adversity. But, if there's never any adversity, if we just win all the time, we dominate, or we're the best. When that hits, and then that's what you see, is then you see the athlete that struggles at some point, because then they no longer are the best on the team. And then it's become a real struggle.
So when I would imagine that one of misconception about what you do is that you help people win.
Mm-hmm.
But I like what you said earlier. For you, the most important is why XYZ person does it. So when that why, because that why could be to become Tiger Woods or Kobe Bryant or did whatever, the CEO of Microsoft or Google or whatever. But not every why is at that level. Some people just want to, like you said, they want to get better. They want to be stronger and deal better with adversity or whatever they're dealing with. So how does that work for you? Like, do you change how you do it, or you just, like you said, you focus on why the person wants to do it, and that's where you lead them to?
Yeah.
And guide them to?
Yeah. I mean, let's start with that first. I mean, if parents knew what it took to be a professional athlete, I can guarantee you most of them aren't going to sign up for it, because of just the athletes that you mentioned there. I mean, that is, people aren't looking at the 125th best golfer in the world. They're not looking at the 125th best tennis player. They're looking at the top 5.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. They have an incredible life. That's kind of a fantasy world. If you take the 125th best doctor in the world, boy, I'll show you a pretty good doctor.
Yeah.
You show me 125th best soccer player in the world, I'm going to show you a great soccer player.
Yeah.
But you're making an awful huge gamble on that, just because of all the factors that go into it. When I deal with an athlete, and that's where I work, a lot with elite athletes, but those that, I mean, sometimes they're struggling with that fun. They have that internal battle that's going on about that, just don't enjoy it anymore. And why not?
Mm-hmm.
And then it is getting back to their why, that, their why changes. Our why changes as we get older. That part's okay. Why we started before may not be why we play now. And it's not my job to be able to tell them what their why should be, but just to help them kind of uncover it and to be okay with who they are in their own skin and their why. I've only come across, I mean, there's tons of different whys that I'll hear. I've only come across 2 that are dangerous. The one dangerous one is because I'm good at it, that's a kiss of death, man, because at some point then they're no longer the best at it. And if the only reason why they're playing is they're good at it, well, they're going to get passed by and they're not going to be willing to do the things that it takes in order to hit those next levels. But they're trapped. They're going to play because they're good at it and it's their identity. It's a really, really difficult place, especially when they get to college. And then the other one is, I play because my parents make me play. That one's kind of self-explanatory. But those are the only two bad ones I really come across. And I think it's my job just as a coach to help them explore it and see where they are and to have them be in touch with it.
So say you do have a kid who, again, I'm not talking about becoming Tiger Woods or Pete Sampras or whatever, Wayne Gretzky, but if you have a kid that comes to you and you can see the progression, they're, like everybody, peaks and valleys, and they're, 14, 15, and they're still loving everything, and they really want to commit to, like, they say, coach, that's all I want to do in my life. I want to be a golfer. I want to be a tennis player. I want to be a soccer player, whatever it is. Is there a difference then in how you approach something, or you still are the same? Just every day or every period is still, okay, are you still wanting to do this for the right reason? Are we moving up? How does that work?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, again, I'm not a hero. I'm just a guide, It's starting with the end in mind. And if it's the end in mind, that's great. 14, 15, depending on where they are. Okay, well, you're not going to be a pro tomorrow. What's the more short-term goal that we've got to work on? So I'm always about like the vision and the dream. I think that's fantastic. I think you got to have that. So the other question is then, why do so many Hall of Famers say never in a million years did I dream I was going to get here? Never in a million years did I think that this was ever possible. They all say that.
Yeah.
I don't think all of them are lying either. I think a lot of them totally agree with that. Because what they developed along the way is they developed a focus just on that process, just on getting better, just on what that next level looks like. And that's the part that I think is important. What's that next level? What's that next celebration that we want to have? Instead of just looking at the total, end dream about what it is, because the journey is going to be more important than it. That's the piece. What's that next level kind of look like? Because then once they reach that level, what I've noticed from those kind of athletes is they kind of look around and then, their why has to change again. If that's all they've ever been focused on that piece is the end goal, it leaves them empty when they hit it, unless they're really in touch with that process.
So when you have a Kobe or a Jordan or Tiger, all of those guys who always said, we don't just want to play in the NBA or whatever the sport, we want to be the best.
Sure.
Ever. Not just even the best ever. We're talking about a very rarefied group of people here. And obviously some of those have made it, and they have become the greatest, so by whatever the standard. How then do they adjust to life outside of being the greatest ever? Because because then the why changes again, because now all of a sudden, okay, you were the greatest basketball player or the hockey player or whatever, and now you're just a dad, or now you're just a husband, now you're just, a guy or a girl.
Yeah, when that cheering stops, I think that's why so many just professional athletes struggle of when the cheering stops and then their identity, as an individual. If somebody's listening to it and their goal is to be number one, they want to be number one, then right away they have to be a little bit off mentally. You do. You got to be a little bit off, because you have to approach things so much differently. You have to be so obsessed about your training and your preparation. You have to be obsessed about it, and you have to be so obsessed that it would be clinically diagnosed as obsessive compulsive. That's how I believe. Because if you look at Michael Phelps, so if Michael Phelps swam every single day, 5 years in a row before his first Olympics, every single day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be classified as, exercise addicted and obsessed. That's how you got to be if you want to be the absolute best at what you do. You have to be off, and and it's just true, man. A lot of times it might be socially awkward people that get to that level, because they're listening in a different tune, And yeah, I think we help those individuals by just figuring out what their identity is as well.
So how do you sometimes, because I'm sure you might have had this, because I'm sure you've had kids who want to be the best and do the work and do everything that they're supposed to do, and fight through all their struggles. But how do you work with, and how do you work together with the parents? Because I'm sure most parents think their kid is going to be the next Michael Jordan, but how, obviously that's not happening, because there's only one. There may be another, Bob Smith, but there may not be another Jordan, right? Or Tiger or whoever. How do we reconcile? Because I'm sure a lot of the kids, most kids, well, maybe I'm wrong, but I would imagine most kids don't say, I want to be the best. Correct?
Yeah.
So the parents think you're going to play for Duke. You're going to play for, Man City. You're going to be playing for the New York Rangers or Yankees or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, so this is the thing, right? Like when you hear Wayne Gretzky speak and the parents would ask him, like, well, can you tell my son how many hours you practiced today? He said, I can't really do that because I just didn't look at it as practice. It's just something I wanted to do all the time. That's the piece where that love and passion has to be there. And they just want to be around it all the time. It's what their passion is. I think to be that passionate about something is so special. It's so unique. And not many people can be the absolute best. What we can be is the best version of ourselves. And to be the best version of ourselves mean working on those really difficult skills that are going to last way beyond when that sport is over. And that's the way I just look at the petri dish of sports and youth sports is what are the skills that we're going to be learning that's going to be applying to, to our careers and to our lives outside of sport when it's done. That's the important piece to me. But those are skills. Sport teaches whatever we want it to teach. Doesn't teach competitiveness by itself. If it teaches winning, ranking, and statistics because that's what we value, then that's what it's going to teach. If we wanted to teach the character, if we want to teach the mental toughness and adversity, then that's the importance of a coach, and then being able to come alongside that person, and then that's what it teaches. But that's the importance about sport, is it teaches whatever we want it to teach.
I like that. What do you make of the often misused word of competition?
Yeah, I mean, competition is a good thing, but people think of an opponent beating somebody else, but the most difficult type of competition is against ourselves, and the reason why it's so difficult is because it's against our own mind, and our mind has a strategic advantage over us, and that strategic advantage is it knows all your strengths and all your weaknesses. So with our mind, if we look at it, it really only has one job, and that's our mind, is to keep us safe. So any time that we step out of that comfort zone, our mind wants to pull back, doesn't want us to put ourselves out there. That's the biggest competition that we're always facing. So if you're trying to face an opponent that knows every one of your triggers, knows your strengths and weaknesses, knows what you're going to do before you do it, that's where it's so difficult to beat that opponent. Mm-hmm. That's where the real competition then comes into play, is who are we competing against, and how do we compete against that opponent?
Now, recently, you've been posting a lot about something that you did. You had like this amazing run that you did recently, the Ironman, and which is by all accounts one of the hardest things to do, because you're by yourself and you have to do it, and it's long and tedious and can be brutal weather, hot, cold, wet, raining, and all of that. And you mentioned that it's almost impossible to coach yourself, right? So how did you work, how did you train for that event, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, so I mean, the Ironman, I didn't even think that was probably the toughest of the races I've done. I think the ultra marathons are probably a little bit more difficult because there is no change. I mean, getting out of the comfort zone. So like my weakest part, you always got to work on the weaknesses. My weakest part was cycling. So right away, man, I joined a cycling team. I show up in, non-cycling gear with everyone else who has the same jersey on.
Yeah.
Buddy, what's important here, man? Making sure that I'm comfortable, now I'm an athlete, so I can fit in pretty easy when it comes to that stuff, and that's the part that, hey, that's what sport provided for me. Knows like how to be an athlete, how you got to, earn your spot, earn your respect, and that's not a problem. And then once you do that, and then once you keep showing back, then you gain the appreciation of other people. But that's getting out of comfort zone to begin with, man. But that's what I needed to do, because I needed to get better on the bike, and I needed people better than myself to be able to teach me and show me how do I need to do things. That was probably the toughest part, man.
How early did you start training for that?
So again, you don't want to follow the Dr. Rob Bell style of training for these races. Okay. For my Ironman was 3 months. That was 90 days of training for it. For my successful ultras that I've done, it's difficult because I've always got a base behind me, but I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. If I'm not in training mode, then I'm just kind of workout mode, and I'll stay in shape.
Yeah.
But when it comes to training mode, that becomes a really huge focus. So, but I always say 90 to 120 days of what I'm training for.
That makes sense. And did you do it by yourself? As in, did you have a coach helping you, or you kind of knew what you had to do?
Well, I know the base of what I have to do, but I'm always relying on people that are better than me at what they do and be able to get their input and feedback from it. Yeah, absolutely. And then be able to train with other people. That's the best part. Community.
Which is kind of like what we're doing with this project. We want to build this community of like-minded people to make the system better.
Yeah.
Because like you said, we cannot do it by ourselves. There's no one, even though for whatever reason coaches think, not all of them, of course, and probably not even most. It's an unfortunate, very small minority that is very loud. That doesn't really, that talks too much, yells too much, screams too much, and says don't too many times, or can't. It's another favorite of mine, in the negative, of course. So when you have, I'm sure you've seen this a lot. Coaches, they do two things. A lot of coaches do this. First of all, they start yelling from sidelines or from the courts or wherever the side of that field is, and which to me, screaming is just screaming, no matter what you're saying, when you're in the middle of a performance. And they always say, toughen up. How do we work to move away from that?
I got a huge respect for coaches and what they do. So I always give coaches and I give teachers the benefit of the doubt. Our society has changed as now we give the student and the athlete the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's where that's wrong. We got to give it to the coaches. We got to give it to the teachers, and the coaching is difficult. It's very tough. And just like our athletes are going to make mistakes out there, I think coaches make mistakes. It's just, do we learn from the mistakes? That's basically it, man. And our coaches willing to learn from that stuff. I'm okay with yellers as coaches. I really am. And the reason why is because now, as long as their players know where that coming from and that they're loved and appreciated outside of their sport. If it's a yeller that is only focused on performance and then what the athlete can do for them, instead of, I'm sorry, let me say that again. Sometimes as coaches, we're only focused on what we can get from the athlete, mm-hmm. instead of what we can do for the athlete. So if you are a coach, if the basis of your coach is one of love and understanding and appreciation for them as individuals, the coaching styles, man, can manifest themselves in a couple different ways. The part that I think that's just empty is if you have a yeller that's going to be out there that the athletes don't believe, think that the coach doesn't believe in them. That's the real tough part. Because you can have coaches that aren't yellers, but then behind the scenes, man, they're just telling them and chastise them in front of their peers, and sometimes that's even worse.
Totally.
So that's where I think coaching is just an art, but I think it has to start with that basis of the athletes got to know that they're loved and appreciated for who they are as individuals, not just what they can do on the sport.
But I think you're right about I like everything you just said. And I think it does make a difference for kids and for adults too.
And I totally agree. So don't get me wrong here. You know, I don't think the yelling style is the best way, because I think, you know, again, I think we make a lot more mistakes when that happens. You know, I always think those coaches that can be able to talk with an athlete is going to be the best. Yeah, don't get me wrong when I say that. I've seen, you know, different coaching styles, and especially with youth athletes, and I don't think there's any need to be yelling at that point for sure. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, you know, I see a lot of college coaches a lot of times, a lot of high school coaches, and these are great coaches, man, and they let their players know how they are loved and appreciated. And because if you look at the job of a coach, I mean, the job of a coach is try to get the best out of somebody on that performance. That's a real difficult job to do. So as long as that's coming from love and understanding and respect, you know, we give them a little bit more leeway.
Couldn't have said it better. No, that makes total sense, and it is true. And see, now you made me think, and I forgot what my next question was going to be.
I'll elaborate on it one more point, you know, because the importance of a coach is simply, you know, there's one negative word that they say to an athlete can really hurt them, you know, and that's why athletes have to be so in charge of their own mental game. And that's the piece that becomes really, really important.
Now, one of the things that I have learned a lot since starting working on our documentary film is how physically boys and girls are different. How they need to be trained differently, they need to prepare differently, strength and conditioning differently, and all of that, stretching differently. Is there a difference between boys and girls when you coach them from a mental strengthening or mental toughness perspective? You have to approach it differently.
Yeah, I do. Again, it's getting back to what's the sport, what's the situation, what are their goals, right? There's a lot of factors that go into that stuff.
Of course.
Team sport, individual sport. You know, if I had to synthesize or distill it into one point, it's oftentimes that guys, if this is the level right here, guys think that they're here, that they're above that level, but they need to be told that they're actually below that level. Girls, on the other hand, generalizing, of course, a lot of times they think that they're below that level, and they need to be shown that they are above that level. That's always been, I think, the major difference on that.
That is a very good point. And that's very important because I find that sometimes too many people don't, like you said, it's very important to take each athlete by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not by themselves, I meant to say individually.
Yeah.
Because no two kids, no two adults are the same.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the things I have noticed is a lot of times we tend to have like a one-size-fits-all mentality. Well, I've done this before, it's worked for whatever many years, so that's it. That's all I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to better ourselves and say, well, might have worked 5 years ago, might have worked with that girls' team or with that swimmer or with that whatever it was, but it doesn't work today. So how do we change? Now, do you think when one of the things that, but I'm not an expert, so I'm just anecdotally asking, when people say toughen up or get over it or stuff like that, does that have a negative impact on the kids?
Well, it's, you know, I mean, if you tell, I mean, it's like telling a kid it's all mental. You know, if you tell a kid it's all mental, it's the absolute worst thing you can ever tell a kid, because what does that even mean? You tell a kid it's all mental, that's supposed to be easy. What you do is you shoot them off in the abyss without any kind of plan, and now they're looking away like, oh, well, something's the matter with me. And now what you've done is now you severely crippled that kid, because now they have to be able to try and navigate, well, what does that even mean? Like, it's all mental. And that's the part I hear all the time, you know? So, yeah, we have to be very specific in terms of like what it is that we mean. No question, man. So if somebody's yelling toughen up, I mean, I don't even think they know what that means. We have to be able to explain what our coaching style is.
Yes, because I've seen a lot of damage caused by toughen up, just by using that word. That we have to be, and maybe, and this is another thing that I think, and we probably can end on this too. It's like, how do we? Because I'm sure that part of a lot of what you do is to be able to find a common language with your athlete, so that the way you speak or the way that you communicate with Jane or Bob or Tommy or whoever matches them. Because you cannot speak the way you speak to me. It's not going to be the same way that you're going to speak to Jane. So how that must be one of the hardest things for you to. I mean, I'm sure by now you probably you have a bag of tricks, but at the beginning it must have been difficult to figure out each kid or each athlete, how to get to them.
You know, it is, man. That's why it's art and science. And there's no easy way to answer that one, Joel. It's just, it's art and science, man. You know?
But that must be, I think that's the fun part though, because that's kind of a lot of like what I do in a sense as a filmmaker, because there's no two movies are the same, no two people are the same. The way I talk to you, that's not the way I'm going to talk to someone else. And it's kind of, I always find that I love that. It's just like, it's something that always fascinates me on how.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part about, you got to understand that somebody's why is, and you know their why, then you get to any how.
Yeah, I mean, perfect example. I had this kid that I did not know how to reach. I tried everything, and I was screwing up left and right because I could not reach this kid. Zero, nothing, not a chance. And I was like, I was pulling my hair out. And then finally I had a chance to talk to his, who I thought was the father. And then I discovered it was the uncle, which immediately made me click. So, okay, I did not know this. And then the uncle told me, well, you know, he's always alone. The father is in jail. The mother is useless. So I'm the only person that he has. And all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, now I understand how to deal with this kid. But it took me a long time. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a horrible coach. I can't figure this kid out. And finally, all this kid needed was a hug.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I gave him a hug. And after that, he was like the best kid I've ever had. Just because I gave him a hug. And it was one of the most rewarding times I've had.
Yeah, it's
more
awesome.
than a goal, more than a win, more than anything else, right? Just to know that kid was like, he almost teared up.
Yeah, good job, coach.
Yeah, well, it's not why I said the story, but it was because I was like, I think must be hard for it. That's one of the most rewarding things for me, to find that whatever clicks with that kid, whatever that kid is, and make them tick. Mm-hmm. It's like what I strive for. Not for winning or losing, because I really don't care about that. It's just what makes them turn. And they actually understand what you're saying. I just hope that we all are, I mean, I know you do, right? Just like one of the things I really want to convey with this movie is like, we can do this, and we can show kids we are there for you. Just, you know, let's work together.